Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for tuning into the Africa Multiple Cluster of Excellence at the University of Bayreuth. Today it's our pleasure to receive here with us Ashanti Dinah Orozco, a poet from Barranquilla in Colombia, but also a student for studying PhD at the University of Harvard in the US. Ashanti has published collections of poems, and her most prominent work is Las Semillas de Muntu. And at the same time, she has also published very numerous articles on the theme of African diaspora and Africanity in general. So today we are going to have a discussion with Ashanti on her poetry, on her worldview about the African diaspora, and about the African diasporic memory and the connection with the continent. So Ashanti, I have a few questions for you. So we're going to have this dialogue for 20 minutes.
Okay.
And I will begin with a very simple question. For every writer, the question, why do you write, is quite simple. But I've noticed doing research in Latin America for a number of years now that this question is not as simple as it is.
Yeah.
Because of the historical situation of the African diaspora. So let me ask you, why do you write?
Okay, good morning. Today is a pleasure to be here with the invitation my brother gave me. Okay, I'm so glad to be here in Germany. This is the first time I come here in Europe, so it was a great trip. It was a great travel to cross the oceans and to be here. This is a very important question that signifies myself as an African woman and from the diaspora. You know what I mean? It's very important to locate myself into a meaning of a standpoint that I consider myself as a writer who concerns about the African philosophy traditions, as a practitioner of Santeria, Palo Mayombe, and who is worried about all these ancestors, as a forest of symbols that, that protect myself. So I'm writing to discuss my place of being in the world that needs to be decolonized.
Okay. So that's very important because writing helps you to locate yourself and to trace your ancestry. I think that's quite clear in your
another point here is writing to deconstruct the racism and racial discrimination against Black people in the world.
Okay. So forcefully, I mean, you are a committed writer by virtue of being an African writer in the diaspora. Of course, you want to give a particular image about the Black people in Colombia in particular, but also generally. And so the image of the ancestor is quite important in your work. And one sees that in almost every poem that you've written. And one other aspect that I think is connected to the issue of the ancestor is the female ancestor. Because when we talk of the ancestors, we usually talk about the forefathers, and sometimes we forget the foremothers. And I see that you have a poem actually that is really really on the women ancestors, like female ancestors. Is there a particular concern that the female ancestor might not have been well represented in the history, in the literature, that you want to rectify? Otherwise, why are you focusing on the female ancestor?
Yeah, I try to recuperate the voices of female Black women in the geopolitical, context of my writing. So I try to recuperate their voices in terms of their participation in the history has not been recognized as well as you know. So the female ancestor mean a way to decolonize the colonization of gender, as Maria Lugones used to term. So this is a way to invite people to read about the Black women participation in different periods of history. So this is a way to recognize her, to give the important participation of these women in different historical situation and context.
Okay. Given that literature, poetry, novel, or drama takes roots from history. I mean, history is quite important. There's a kind of symbiotic relationship between literature and history. And in the history of the Afro descendants in Colombia, we know of male heroes, Padilla,
Definitely.
Romero, Manuel Pia, and many others. Are there some female figures that maybe we who study the history of Colombia from the outside might miss out on? Do you have like historical, also historical examples of Colombian Afro descendants, Colombian women who have played a crucial role in history, maybe in Colombia, but also in Latin America in general?
I would like to say that, for example, if we are thinking about African literature or African Latin American literature, focus on this especially field, we know that there is a male tradition, Afro-Caribbean and Afro-Colombian male tradition that recognize just men. As for example, Manuel Zapata Olivella, Candelario Beso, Jorge Artel, and many others. And the way we signify the participation of historical black women is to recognize her. So I think, and I would like to focus on literature. So we might say that, for example, one of the greatest female writers in Colombia is Mari Grueso Romero. Yeah. And we recognize this ancestral woman as a way that we conduce our lives in Colombia. So one of them are heroic women that participate in the emancipation against slavery and throughout the times of the reconstitution of the independence in Colombia. So we need to organize like a canonical Afro-Latin American literature that includes the black female women in this chronological kind of construct this historical tradition or archives. So we need to deconstruct the archives in order to put in the black women's in the recognition of the historical account.
Thank you very much. It's good that you mentioned Mari Grueso, whom I met almost at the same time that I met you in the Feria del Libro in Bogota, 2019. And I also had the chance to talk to her when she came to my class in Buenaventura.
Wow,
I had
amazing.
the chance to. My students surprised me. They just said it was our last Laboratorio de Literatura Africana, and they just said they were going to surprise me. So they arranged and then brought her to my class. And it was quite a very interesting gift, you know. But the question I want to ask you about Mari Grueso is, in Colombia, one has come to know that, and that's something I would discuss also with Javier Ortiz when the time comes, about that Colombia, the African diaspora in Colombia is so diverse, and that when one visits the Pacific part of Colombia and then you go to the Atlantic part, there's a kind of difference. I cannot
the
express.
Caribbean,
Yes,
Caribbean.
the Caribbean, the Caribbean part of the country. There's a difference that you notice also in the discourse of the people. So when you read the works of Mari Grueso and maybe compare it to your poetry or to any other Caribbean writer, do you yourself, even as a writer, notice some differences?
You notice the difference, you know. Colombia has a fragmentary geographical position, and there is a big difference between the Pacific coast and the Caribbean coast. We must say that there is a huge identification in the Colombian Caribbean, with the great great Caribbean. I mean, with Dominican Republic, with Cuba, with Puerto Rico, and the rest of the island. And there isn't, or there is a gap, an historical gap that that can be problematic in order to identify what are the borders between Colombia, because there is the Andean hegemonic, region in Colombia, and the rest of us, the litorales, the Pacific coast and the Caribbean coast, has been doing or making a role as a subaltern of the history
Of Colombia.
because we are racialized. We have a geographical racialized region. Yeah, so there is a big difference between these coast, but beyond this, I think there is a relationship among us in terms of the racialized geographical position and the way we are fighting against racism and racial discriminations every day in our lives. I think this is something that we have in common.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Going back to poetry, there is a strong presence of what we can call African religiosity in your text, and also even in your intellectual writings. There's a strong focus on African religiosity, and which, for me, I got to know more about this religiosity when I began working on Latin America, especially with Colombia and Brazil in particular. So, which means that the African religiosity that the Kodomble, the Orishas have come to represent, of course, which is Yoruba. And when I look at the way it has been transformed in the diaspora, it is quite amazing and surprising to some of us from the mother continent, And but then I was listening to Wole Soyinka recently. Wole Soyinka, the Nobel Prize winner.
Nigerian one, yeah.
And that's the one who has made the Yoruba mythology very popular through his drama, through his works. So if you ask me how did I know about the Orishas, it's through the works of Wole Soyinka. But then when I listened to his interview, he said he doesn't believe in any religion, be it Western or African, that Yoruba, the Orishas are for him a mythology. So my question to you is are the Orishas a religion for you or mythology, and what could be the difference between what you consider to be religion and mythology? And a myth is something you can mobilize to convey an ideal, it could be a utopia. But what is the difference between using or considering the Orishas as a religion, which implies worshipping, and using it simply as mythology?
Okay, mythology is a problematic word that comes from Greek philosophy. So I don't consider that Yoruba tradition as mythology. This is my position here. I am a practitioner of Santeria and Palomayombe, as I said before, and I consider these traditions as as a pluriverse of knowledges. Orishas have knowledge, and this knowledge means to be positioned in the worldview sphere, or in the worldview intellectual tradition. So this is a way to construct, to build an intellectual tradition related with the world with the Orishas world. So I think Orishas give us knowledge, and this knowledge is a way to decolonize the human being. So we must consider that one of the visions of the Western philosophy visions has made by consider the African body or the black body as non-being. So as used to say Franz Fanon. But by doing or by writing about the Orishas is a way to recuperate these knowledges that has been through the years, the hundreds of years of knowledges, and to recuperate the relationship with Muntu and Ubuntu philosophy, that means the relationship with the nature, with the animals, with the forest. And this is a way to think about the important role of our God and goddesses have in our life and in our daily life. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And then talking about the use of Orisha symbols in your poetry, water is a constant imagery in almost all your poems. Water. So
Water, yeah.
is water used mainly as, of course, it's a strong symbol in the spirituality, in the rites, like the rituals of the Orisha or Condomble, but there's also a historical reading of water, the sea, the ocean, in diasporic literature. We know of the works of Derek Walcott. We know the works of Kamau Brightwhite, who died recently. What tides, what the waves mean. Mm-hmm. So how do you mobilize this double meaning of water, the historical one, and also by the religious dimension of water?
What the water give a sense to the death, the apocalypse, because of the middle passage, But at the same time, it's life. It means life for us. So there is a kind of eco-poetic crossings in the sense of building a sense of water. Water as the relationship with the female Orisha, Oshun, the Orisha of the rivers, but the reconstruction of the meaning of the sea with relation to Yemaya, the Orisha of the sea. So we have a strong meaning identification with the waters that purify our bodies.
Okay. That also connects very well with the omnipresence of death and life in your work, because there's so much focus on the death, of course, because of those who died in the Middle Passage, but also the fact that their death gives birth to the.
And I'm thinking about Camus Brauway, dialectics.
Dialectics, exactly.
Marialéctica, which is the definition translation into Spanish.
Oh, okay.
As a philosophy of being in the Caribbean, the waves, the movement
of the waves.
Our body, the performance of our body, ourself.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's very interesting, because I'm also a student of Kama Brightwhite, and we studied the Arrivants in school. Yeah, so this is quite interesting. So in your poetry, one also notes that there could be, you construct your poetry on a long tradition. In literary criticism, we say every text is an intertext, which means that you always also borrow from precursors, from those who have come before you. So when I was reading your poems, I think of Jorge Artel, Tambores en la Noche. There's also the insistence on the drums in your poetry. Drums feature as a means of communication, as also a strong Afro-diasporic symbol.
Yeah,
the drum.
Definitely.
Be it in Peru, in Colombia, in Venezuela, the drum is a strong symbol.
And Brazil with Candomblé, yeah.
So, but at the same time, also I saw you making reference to William Blake, which is quite interesting. We also did William Blake in school, Songs of Innocence and Experience. So, is it also
Jorge Luis Borges?
Yes,
also
Jorge
mentioned.
Borges, exactly. So it means that this is quite interesting, because it means your poetry is enriched by multiple traditions.
Yeah.
Yeah. So can you maybe throw light on that?
Yeah. I think you need to be informed by the canon literature. Yeah. If you wanted to write against the canon literature, you need to be informed by them. That's the dialectic point here, the binary between who I am and through the question who I am, you need to situate yourself looking for the traditional or the Western literature, but to reconstruct yourself as someone who belongs to diasporic counterpoint. You need to recuperate all these voices in order to creative construct or to build a literature that has a creolized, a transcultural, creolized writing. Includes the palimpsestus, this intertwined, the dialogue intertwined between Western philosophy and the ancestral and traditional and oral historiographical tradition from Africanist vision.
Thank you so much. And this was an intro to what we're going to have tomorrow. As we're going to have a longer discussion tomorrow. So see you tomorrow at 7 p.m. at Kultu House, and it's going to be transmitted live on YouTube. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, and Ache.
Okay.